Welcome to the Hammer and Fire podcast. I'm Nicholas Kesterson,
And this is Chaplain Ted.
and today we are going to be moving away from what we've kind of been talking about, as in getting right with God, moving on to stumbling blocks that we have to get out of the way so that we can clearly follow God and know what He wants. Because it's hard to fix our relationships with people, with God, and with the church if we're not willing to get rid of the stumbling blocks that are harming us.
Oh, can I say something?
Yeah.
So you call them stumbling blocks, but I think we gotta let the people know that sometimes when they go to church, it's called getting your toes stepped
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, that happens a lot. A lot of times when someone points them out, we get our toes stepped on, and we kind of get our feelings hurt. But
It's all said out of love.
yes, and it is. And if somebody isn't, then um, shame on them.
Mm-hmm.
But so we're going to be moving through. There's quite a few of these stumbling blocks, and they're going to be very familiar to most people because these are the big ones that we deal with on a daily basis. And for us, we seen it only right to start with, I would say, the original sin, and not talking about the sin in the garden, talking about the first sin that we're ever told about, when Lucifer thinks that he is better than God, that he is as powerful as God, and gets cast out. And that is the first sin of pride. And pride is something that I think as a society we have gotten to the point that we have trouble recognizing it
Mm-hmm.
because it is passed off so many times in society as being a positive thing, that we should be proud of what we do. We should be proud of our accomplishments, and we should have this arrogance about us. I've talked about this before with like football players and basketball players and all these athletes and celebrities, that we want them to be cocky, and we want them to be, show out and do all these, celebrations and all that. And we tell these kids, oh, it's all right to be prideful. It's all right to act that way. But again, it's pride. And it doesn't take a long time to find it in the Bible that pride is not a good thing. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But the first thing we want to start off with is, what does pride look like? And like I said, I've hit on a couple examples so far. But what does pride look like in each individual person? And to me, when I think of pride, I think of it in my own self and look at it through the lenses of myself. And I think that we have to be open about that as Christians, and that to self-reflect on ourselves and be able to see our problems. And again, pride is probably one of the hardest stumbling blocks that I have, that getting over. And, and pride looks like, when you think you're better than somebody else at something. And a lot of times you look down on other people. And I know Ted, our little pre-meeting that we had before this, we kind of talked about this, but it leads to pride in most of our lives. Looks at anger. We will see that in the Bible, that anger, when somebody does something wrong to you. Pride is, again, looking down on somebody else because they don't live up to what you think the expectations should be, even though yourself, you don't look at it, but you're not living up to expectations of everybody else either. And it's thinking, again, you're smarter than somebody else, that you know everything, that everybody should listen to you, that anytime somebody offends you, you got to be angry at that person because, you're always right. And again, a lot of times there's probably people listening thinking, man, that sure sounds like my spouse, but again, if you're saying that, you probably need to look back in the mirror because it's probably you as well. But again, we all struggle with pride, I think. And I think it's one of the so many sins stem off of it. And we're going to get into that more later too. But it leads to so many other things. And I'm going to let Ted discuss what pride looks like for him and, in society.
So I think that pride is become such a positive thing that it's actually destroying society. You hardly ever hear about humility.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost non-existent.
Yeah, you don't hear about that. You don't hear about virtue. Those things are non-existent. It's always pride. Um, but God despises pride.
Mhm.
We have to be, humble. Um, so I'm going to I want to read something here about pride. Pride can manifest itself in different ways, whether it be through a job well done, an accomplishment recognized, or simply in the knowledge of one's own worth and abilities. It is a powerful motivator and can drive individuals to achieve greatness and reach their full potential. What does pride look like? It looks like strength, confidence, and a sense of self worth. It is the mark of achievement and the celebration of one's own capabilities. Um, we need to focus more on God than ourselves.
Well, again, it's one of those things that we talk about it all the time. Our abilities are not our own abilities. I've said it in some of my thoughts of the day, where it's any ability we have, anything that we're able to do, is because God gives us that ability, not because do we're doing it on our own, and we fail a lot of times and look at it that way. And I've said before, you need to remember it, because God can take that ability away just as easily as He gave it to you.
Yeah, for sure. Next.
Okay, now our second question is how do we identify pride in our lives? So again, this goes back to what we've kind of talked about as self-reflection. I think if we don't do a good job at self-reflection and reflecting on what we do and look at it from a lens of God, we can look at ourselves as like we do nothing wrong, which again is part of our pride in ourselves, is we don't want to admit that we're wrong. And so identifying pride, again, look at yourself. Or do you look down on somebody? Are you looking down on somebody for, they're not as smart, they're not as educated, they're not just something about them? Are you looking down on anybody? And a lot of times that's a really good indicator that you have pride somewhere in your life, because pride makes us feel like we're better than other people and we're better than everybody else. And so we get blinded by our own problems. And so that's one good indicator to identify pride. Another good indicator is an uncontrollable, like, anger. When someone says something to you or disagrees with you or calls you out, or having that extreme anger because of that, and wanting, and being so angry and ignoring that person and all that because they point out something wrong with you. Again, that's a great indicator that you have pride.
Yeah, that's like one of my notes here. Pride can manifest itself in a reluctance to admit mistakes or accept criticism, as we may feel that to do so would be to admit weakness or failure.
And that's the key there. Admitting weakness and failure is, we don't like doing that. And as Christians, we have to get out of that mindset, because it's okay to have moments of weakness. We have to understand that it's okay for someone to tell us, hey man, I'm your friend. I see you going down a wrong path. I see you going down the wrong way. Hey, I think you need to reevaluate. And if you don't check your pride and you let that become a stumbling block, you're losing somebody. You're going to get angry at them, and you're going to lose a friend that truly cares about you and your walk with God, and seeing you achieve something. And so we have to check that pride at the door, and we have to be able to take criticism. And I'm telling you, it is one of the hardest things. I struggle with it so much in my own life when someone criticizes something that I do. And a lot of times, now there are times that people criticize you, and it's out of their own pride. They're trying to make you feel lower. But when someone is genuinely just trying to help you better yourself, become a better teacher, a better, hospital employee, whatever it is, whatever your job is, or if someone talks about it at church, hey, I think you're doing a good job, but hey, here's a place that I think God wants you to improve in. And if you're not willing to accept that criticism, you're going to leave yourself worse than where you can be, and you're not able to grow.
Yeah, so the notes I have is to combat pride in our lives, it is important for us to practice humility and self awareness by acknowledging our flaws and limitations, and we can cultivate a more realistic and balanced view of ourselves. By focusing on the needs and perspectives of others, we can develop a greater sense of empathy and compassion.
Yeah, that's a big one, and again, that leads back to um, love, and I think of First Corinthians 13, where it talks about love is patient, love is kind, and it says that love is not pride, doesn't have pride. And I think that to have compassion and empathy, you have to be able to uh, put pride aside, because pride lets you see everything as I'm perfect, that I do everything right and everybody else is wrong. And so when somebody else does something wrong, or somebody else is in a bad situation, we look at it like, well, you're in that bad situation because it's your fault, and you have no empathy. You don't feel for the person because you're not able to look at it from their perspective and what's happening with them. And again, it comes back from that I think I'm better than everybody else. That pride really, what pride's all about. Now, we want to not only talk about pride from our personal perspective, we also want to dig into what the Bible says, because that is where we have to go to get a complete picture of what pride is and how we can, uh, so that again, it's not just us saying this. We want you to know that where we're driving this from is from the Bible. It's not our own thoughts or something like that. It's what the Bible says and what the Bible wants us to do.
So do you want to start with your scriptures that you chose? Because I only have that one that I think maybe towards the end. Um,
Yeah. I'm going to say, before we get started with our scriptures, we just picked out a few scriptures, but there are so many. I'm going to tell you right now, just read the book of Proverbs and you will find countless scriptures talking about pride.
yeah.
But the one that I want to focus on, and Ted kind of hit on this before, is Proverbs 16:5, and it says, "For everyone that is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though hand join in hand, he shall not be unpunished." And again, this is a very powerful scripture, and I debated back and forth on using it because I don't want to, you know, be fire and brimstone all the time. But it's so important to remember that pride, the sin of pride to God, is again an abomination. And again, as we talked about, it's that first sin that we hear about is that pride. And so it's abomination. And those that are prideful, they get what's coming to them. And the Bible says that multiple times, that at some point you're going to get a punishment for that. If it be in this world, in this time, or in the next, but you will have a punishment for that pride. And then I'll go ahead and let you read yours. The Psalms 10:4 that I want to talk about, it kind of goes with the question later on.
Okay, so the one that I chose was in Isaiah chapter 2, verses 11 through 12. The lofty looks of a man shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. For the day of the Lord, a time of judgment, was coming for those who denied, neglected, or rejected God because of their pride. This prophecy was fulfilled in part when God used the Assyrians and Babylonians to destroy Israel's land. In the larger perspective, the day of the Lord refers to the time when God will defeat and put an end to all evil on the earth.
And again, we see Isaiah talking about specifically here the Israelites and those that, you know, again, you had the people that believed that they were better than everybody else, and how he talked about how this idea and that pride that built in Israel as they followed him, they seen them getting all these victories and beating all these people, and they started to look at it as in, I did this, that look at how powerful we are. And they got that pride, and then we see where God multiple times takes another country and allows them to defeat the Israelites and show them you're not as powerful as you think you are. You aren't powerful. I give you victory. I give you power. And until they learn their lesson, they're usually in captivity. So I love this as an example of what pride what a punishment of pride can look like, especially with the Israelites. I also wanted to include later on in Proverbs 16, we talked about 16:5, but I also wanted to read 16:8, 18, and 19. And it says, "Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fail. Better is it to be a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud." And again, it just shows what comes with pride, that in the moment you might feel like you're better than somebody else. In the moment you might think pride is a good thing, but it comes before the fall. As it says here, that everybody that lives that life of pride and thinking that they're better than everybody else, at some point there's a fall. And it's usually a quite dramatic fall. I think of myself, I think of a lot of our celebrities. Some of our kid celebrities, some of, adult celebrities, how, they're on top of the world. They have a good movie, they have a couple good movies, they get on top of the world, and their pride is just astronomical. And then you see the same one a couple years later, addicted to drugs, just living a awful life, even with money. They're living this, they're addicted to drugs and going to rehab and going to jail and all this. And again, you see how that pride lifts them up so high, and then they drop because, again, they start, that pride that they have in themselves is temporary, that eventually you start trying to live in that perfection of the pride you think you have, that you're perfect. And then you become a perfectionist. And when you become a perfectionist, everything has to be perfect, and you end up stressing yourself and having anxiety to a point that just, you fall away. And so again, that's what it looks like. That's what pride and that fall looks like.
So are you done with your scriptures?
Yes.
So I got one more. James chapter 4, verse 6 reminds us that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. This serves as a poignant reminder that humility and meekness are virtues that are celebrated in the eyes of the Lord, while pride is viewed as a stumbling block that can distance us from Him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to get to that here in a second. But the next question we want to look at is, how does pride link to control? Because I think that these are two things that link up so, I don't want to say wonderfully, like it's a good thing, but they link up just perfectly together, because pride leads to control, and that we want to control other people. And we see this a lot in a lot of marriages. You have a spouse or both spouses that are very prideful in personality, and it leads to one of them usually being more controlling than the other. Both of them sometimes are, but you always hear about the cases of the husband or the wife that is controlling over the other spouse, that they don't want to let them go do anything. They don't want them to do anything that they want them to do. That you have to do what I tell you to do. I control you. And again, that leads back to the pride aspect of it, that I believe that I am always right. I believe I know all the answers. And I believe that my idea, what I believe is best for you, is what you should be doing. And I'm going to force you to do it through control. And a lot of times, again, it leads us into, and then we also get in the pride aspect of control, where we talk about that we think so highly of ourselves that we think that we can control a certain situation. So many times I find myself, when somebody's going through something hard, or my wife is having a bad day, or I see somebody struggling, and I think that there's something I can do. I want to do something. I want to fix it right then, right now. And the problem is I believe that with my pride, I believe that I can actually do something, because I believe that I am pretty good at this or pretty good at that. And I think that there's something I can say to fix their problems, and that control, and then it starts eating at you, because then you realize, for example, if it's a health problem, there's nothing that you can do about it. It doesn't matter how bad you want to fix the problem, you can't fix it. And that it relies on God to fix that problem. And so you end up spiraling, because you're wanting to fix problems you can't fix, because your pride thinks that you can do more than what you can actually do. So, I mean, how in your life, or how do you see, pride, how pride is linked to control?
I think that what you were just talking about, that's kind of what I want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got to remember to let God be in control. That's part of my journey that I've had to go through. And my pride was really bad in the early days. That's from my military service, my PTSD. I could fix it. I can do it myself. And you just got to come to that point of humility and letting God take control. Until then, and like you're talking about movie stars, you see that all the time. They're up there high, like I was, in the corporate world. And a few years later, you see it. Yeah, you come to that point. Pride is destruction.
Mm-hmm.
God does not tolerate pride.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think it kind of falls back to the first rejection that we know of, or that we're told of in the Bible, is linked to pride, is Lucifer thinking that he was better than God. I mean, I could see how that would be such an abomination, which there are plenty of other sins that are abomination, but I mean, that's the first one. That's the first instance we have of God being challenged.
So, I mean, this is what come across my mind. A lot of people, I'm thinking of myself, my experience. Those years of going through the major trials and tribulations and addictions, God allows that. And that's pride. I mean, you think you can fix it, you can control it, and God allows that. He's just sitting there waiting, or he's following you, waiting till you come to that final step, and you bow down in humility, and you just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, exactly that God a lot of times just lets us, okay, you think you can handle it? You think you got everything under control?
Yeah.
Here you go. I'm going to let the floodgates go. You know, I'm gonna let you really feel what it's like to have everything, to control everything, and you know, to think about how much he holds back. And I don't think people realize that the amount of stuff that he withholds from everybody, not even just us as Christians, but even those that are not saved, how much he holds back and how bad it could be. And you know, and sometimes he just says, here's your little taste of it. You know, I want you to see that you're not as, you don't have it under control. You can't control it. You're not as good as you think you are. You know, and it's such a wake up call. And for some people, it doesn't wake them up enough to find God. I think sometimes it's just because they don't realize it.
Yeah.
But I struggle with me, and this is, I get on social media so much, and I see people post religious stuff, and I love it. And then you go to the comment section, and you have some of these, you know, keyboard warriors or whatever you want to call them. They get on there and have I guess, the audacity to act like, to put God on trial, I guess, to just say that I wouldn't want to serve a God like that, or God, you know, I don't want to serve a God like that. And I think to myself, what pride must you have to think that your little bit of intelligence, the little bit you have, the speck compared to God, that you're going to sit there and judge God and what his decisions are and what he thinks, and how much pride, how big your head must be. I mean, how do you even get out of your house in the morning? Yeah. Your head's so big. But to say that about God, and to think that you're higher than God, and it's just like, I just can't imagine that arrogance. I don't think I ever, and again, I was a sinner, and I made mistakes. And how much hatred do you have to have for something you say you don't believe in? I mean, that's just, it blows my mind. Like, how much you say that God doesn't exist, but how mad people get that you believe in something. It's just like, I don't get that mad when Santa Claus, you know, when someone says, "Oh, Santa Claus thinks you're a liar," or "Santa Claus thinks you're on the naughty list," and I'm just like, okay, whatever. You know, like, it's not existent. It's not an existent person. So why, if you don't think God exists, why are you so angry at everybody else because they believe in him?
Yeah.
Like, if somebody else believes in Santa, fine, okay, whatever. Like, I don't get mad about that. Why do you get so mad about other people? You know?
Yeah, we've talked about before, and I've even given a message twice on it about, you know, selfishness and pride. It's just horrible, terrible.
And it's just, and it don't make me angry, you know, and that's a lot of people think that, you know, the people are angry about it. It doesn't make us angry. As Christians, more than anything, it should make us sad.
Yeah.
To think about that person has that mentality, has that thought, and where that leads them. And that eventually one day, as much as they don't want to believe he exists, they're going to stand before him and have to, and be judged based on what they did, and they're going to be punished for eternity because of it.
You're talking about we don't get angry about it. I don't know, back in the day, I probably would have, but you know, I wasn't close to God. But you know, after you know, I started my walk with God, peace that I have, the joy that I have serving God. Um, how do I say this? It's like I'm under His umbrella, you know. So I don't get angry like I used to, because of that peace. And like you said, you know, I feel sad for people have that burden for their soul.
Yeah.
So,
I think about it like there's a Christian song that says, "Lord, give me your eyes so I can see. Give me your heart. Give me your arms so I can reach." I think as you get closer to God and your devotion to God gets greater, I think you start seeing those things from a godly lens instead of focusing on it. We don't see it from the human aspect of it. We do see it through God's eyes. We see it through God, a heart of God's heart, and it's just you start losing a lot of that anger for things because you realize that you shouldn't be angry for them. You should be sad for them that they have, you know, that one day we know it and we're here and we can, and as long as we keep the correct path, we're going to one day be in heaven. But that person, if they don't get right with God, they're going to burn in hell for eternity. Even as much as people don't want to, they want to twist the scripture to act like hell is not going to be the punishment it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on to number 5, which is how does pride hinder our walk with God? And I want to start this one with reading Psalms 10:4. And it says, "The wicked, through the pride of his countenance, will not seek after God. God is not in his thoughts." And I have read some different translations that say it in different ways, but basically what it's telling us is that a person that is consumed with pride, that's consumed with oneself, selfishness, has no room in their life for God. They don't see the importance of Him, and that's the whole point. How can your walk with God be meaningful? Can be constructive if you don't have any room for them, that you think that you have it all under control, you think that you can do all of it, that you know everything, that you're always right. You have no room in your life for God because what God requires of us in our walk with Him and in our relationship with Him is falling on our knees and saying, I cannot do this on my own. I have to have you, God. That without you, there is no way that I can continue down this path. There's no way that I can continue to be close to you, that I am a sinful person, that my body, my flesh is working against me. It wants me to fail. It's sinful. And that I need your spirit and I need you in my life to move closer to you. And if you're prideful, if your life is consumed with pride, you never get to that point because you think, okay, I can do enough. And this is where it comes back to when you see in Matthew, it says that they're going to come before the Lord and he's going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. And that, but I did this and I did that and I did all these things in your name. And he's still going to tell them to depart. And again, there's the pride aspect. I did this. I did that. And he's going to say, you don't have a relationship with me. You did it for yourself. You cast out demons because you wanted somebody to say that, look at him, look at what he can do. You fed the poor because you wanted everybody else around you to see what you could do. You did things in his name, but it wasn't for him. You wanted everybody else around you to see it. And, that is the whole point. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize and don't look at that scripture the way it is. It's because you're doing it out of the wrong heart, which is what pride does to you. A lot of people, and I struggle with this on a daily basis with me in my walk with God, is making sure that when I'm doing something like this podcast or my videos or worship and praise in the church, if I'm getting to the point that it's becoming about me or about the people around me watching me, am I wanting, people to say stuff to me? Am I wanting people to, then I'm not doing it for God. I'm doing it for people, and I'm not going to get the prize that I should get from it because I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm not doing it for Him. I get as the Bible says, I get my reward on earth from people.
Yes. I think that's something that we both battle is that we question.
Mhm.
everything that we're doing. Is this right? Are we doing this right? And I think that's another reason. Well, not just that I was an introvert, but I was always questioning: should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do that?
Yeah.
But let God control it.
Well, and another thing that I struggle with is I have this problem with rejection. A lot of times, I mean, as you can tell from the videos and from the audio and all that, I'm not afraid to talk. I'm not afraid to talk, and I'll talk your ear off once I'm we've had a connection, and we have something to talk about. But I struggle so much talking to strangers because I fear rejection. I fear that someone's going to reject me or not talk to me, and so I never even get the conversation started because I'm so afraid of rejection. And again, it falls back to pride that I don't want to be rejected because again, it makes me look weak. It makes me look bad. So I let my rejection and the fear of rejection control me talking to people that need to hear about God. And it's one of those things that I'm having to work on a daily basis to get rid of that fear of rejection and just be like, again, and people say this all the time, what's the worst that's going to happen to you? They're going to say no. And it's so hard sometimes. And it's, again, the pride in our lives, not being able to set it aside and saying.
I think you covered my notes, but pride can cloud our judgment and lead us away from God's will. When we are consumed by pride, we may prioritize our own desires and ambitions over God's plans for us. Our ego can prevent us from seeking guidance from God and following His path for our lives. Pride is a dangerous mindset that can hinder our walk with God in numerous ways. It is important for us to humble ourselves before God, acknowledge His authority in our lives, and seek His guidance in all that we do. Let us strive to cultivate a spirit of humility and surrender to God's will so that we may walk closer with Him on our journey.
Yeah. Again, exactly. Again, when you have pride, you don't see the importance of God. You don't have room to put God. I mean, why? So if you think about it, I'm going on my walk with God. I'm trying to get closer to God. I'm trying to be more spiritual. And if I'm sitting here with pride and thinking, I got this all under control. I know what I'm doing. I don't need any of this. And you're just walking along and you're not following God's guidance. You're not letting God talk to you and show you the way because you think you already know the right way. So how can you truly see God and His path for you? I see it all the time now. As I have gotten closer to God and my pride has decreased, you start seeing little things around you of God trying to nudge you in the right direction or point you in the right direction. And when you're consumed with pride, you don't see it because you're like, I'm dead set on this. I know this is what I want. This is what I need to do. And you don't look at the signs around you telling you, okay, this might be a bad situation. And so, again, that is what is the key to us, why it hinders our walk with God and why we have to get rid of it in our lives. Now, you have something?
No, I was reviewing my notes for the next one.
Okay, so the last question that we want to cover is why is pride linked to so many other sins? And I think we have kind of hit this one all around throughout the entire podcast. But we're just going to hit it specifically. I think pride is linked to so many sins because it is our own selfish desires to please the flesh that leads us into these sins. So you look at sexual immorality. Again, that is the pride of oneself, the flesh, the selfishness of wanting something that feels good, and an addiction where you're talking about, smoking weed or doing, heroin or meth or something like that. It gives you a high. It makes you feel something, and it makes you feel good. And so that selfishness, that pride of wanting to feel good and wanting what's best for me, leads to, so many other sins. I mean, you could look at every sin, and you could probably, in some way, link it back to pride.
Yeah. Pride, often deemed the root of all sins, like we said, is a dangerous attribute that can lead to a myriad of immoral actions. It can blind us to the fault within ourselves, making us believe we are above reproach and beyond scrutiny. It can fuel envy as we view others with jealousy and resentment for achieving success or possessing qualities we desire. Pride can also give rise to wrath as our egos are bruised and our sense of self importance is threatened. This anger and hostility towards others can then manifest into greed as we seek to obtain more power, wealth, or resources to bolster our inflated sense of self worth. Um, it becomes apparent why it is so closely intertwined with a multitude of other sins. It is the catalyst that ignites a chain reaction of immoral behaviors, leading us down a treacherous path toward moral decay.
Well,
We must strive to cultivate humility and self awareness, acknowledging our limitations and imperfections by humbling ourselves and recognizing the inherent value and dignity of all individuals. We can break free from the grip of pride.
and I think, there was something that you hit on there when it talked about, trying to do something to bolster your pride or that sense of self that you have. And, we see it, we even see it in Hollywood and in TV shows and in real life when you have these people that will do anything to continue to be in power. They're willing to silence anybody, get rid of anybody that gets in the way. And you see how that leads to so many sins. I mean, again, like a TV show. You watch a TV show about like one of those homicide shows, and it's just like these people, like a senator, somebody's going to release his his big secret, and so he murders them to hide the secret. Again, there's another sin that it links to so many. It's just a stepping stone, and it starts off small, and that's where people don't realize it. It sneaks up on you. It's just a little bit at a time, a little bit more, and a little bit more. And that's what Satan does with so many sins is he just a little bit more until you've gotten to the point that, I mean, it's like having a safety line that's not tied to anything. It's just wound around it. And as you get further and further and further out, finally that string disconnects and you're out there by yourself. There's nothing holding you. There's no way to get back. Kind of like if you were to go into a cave and you leave the line behind you, to make sure you can get your way out. Well, if the line's not connected to anything and you just keep going, your string runs out. Well, you don't know how to get back. And again, the little by little, he chips away. He makes, okay, this is just a little sin. I'll just do a little sin. I'll be a little bit of pride. Oh, now a little bit of pride leads to a little bit of, an anger, a little bit of, greed. And before you know it, you're to the point that I'm willing to do anything to continue to make people believe that I'm who people think I am. And so it's one of those things that it links to so many sins because a lot of times it's the starting point to so many sins. It's not as much that pride is this or pride is that, but it starts that chain reaction and that idea in yourself, that I have to continue this, idea.
Yeah.
So, again, we're going on and we're going to continue to go through each one of these stumbling blocks. And I think, like I said, we started with pride because I think it leads to so many more of the other ones that we're going to talk about. And it's one of those things that until you get these things out of your life, until you let God, I mean, first of all, we talked about, worship, prayer, salvation, baptism. You get that stuff and you become a Christian and a true Christian. Then you have to start getting those bad things out of your life because until you let God and give control over to God and allow Him to help you cleanse those bad things out of your life, there's no way that you're going to be able to fix those relationships. You're not going to be able to get closer to God, and you're going to stagnate, and you're going to end up falling away. So you have to. A lot of people want to skip these things. They want to look at the good stuff. They want to look at all the nice things. But when it's the stuff that steps on our toes, that makes us feel bad, we want to just kind of skim over it and say, I don't want to touch it.
I can't remember the quote, but you know how I am about Charles Spurgeon. But something about he said that if you're reading the Bible and you feel convicted, that's probably what you need to focus on correcting. Same thing about if you're going to church and you're listening to the word from the pastor and it's stepping on your toes or making you squirm in your chair, then when you leave service, you probably need to go check on that and work on
it. Do a little research, figure out, and self-reflect.
Yep.
And a lot of times, again, the pride gets in the way, and we don't want to do that. And and that's it. Like if you're feeling convicted about something, that means you need to be doubling down on it. It doesn't mean that you need to skip over it because it makes you feel bad. It means that God's trying to talk to you, and you have to look at it and understand it. And so next week is depression and anxiety, and we are going to have a guest speaker, one of the members of our church that is an actual worked in the mental field for a long time. So he's going to give us an insight on some things that we wouldn't be able to tell you from our perspective. But again, I want to end this just talking about we have Bible study Saturdays starting at 5:00. We would love you. It's talking about discipleship. It's hitting a lot of the same things that we're talking about. Also, we have church on Sunday. Prayer starts at 9:20. Service starts at 10. We have Grace Point Kids so that it allows you to, if you have some little kids and you want to have some place where they can learn Jesus and God on their level while you're worshiping and hearing the sermon over in the church, then we have that. We also have church on Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month, which is the one that's going to be when this comes out, is prayer night, where we come and we just pray. And then after that, we have Bible study. That starts, the one that is the first of the month starts at 7 and ends at about 8. And then every other Wednesday after that until the first of the month again starts at 6:20 with prayer and then 7 for Bible study. So we would love to have you. Again, the Grace Point Clarksville, it's in Clarksville, Arkansas. You can find, we have a Facebook page for it. And we would just love to have you. It's a great church. We want to see you grow, and we want to see, God working in our community and, around the world. And I hope that you have a great week. I hope that you look at your life and see where pride might be leaking into your life and it might be affecting you, and that you can kind of get it out. And so have a good week, and God bless.
God bless.
In the quiet of the morning, as the sun begins to rise, I see your faithfulness painted across the skies. Through the seasons changing and every ebb and flow, your constancy surrounds me, a love that I know. Faithful God,